What's up, y'all? It's your boy, Mr. Oliver. I'm a little sick when I'm recording this, so I apologize in advance if I sound sick. You know what? I don't apologize. Let's talk about Europe. Oh, there's votes for women. All right, so I know what you're thinking. You look at this, homie, and you're like, Louis Napoleon. Oh my goodness, let's look at that facial hair. And really, just take a look at it. Because not only does he have this great old-timey mustache, but he's also doing the mustache, like the thin mustache thing. And also, look at this. Look at that little beard coming out from right here. Right here. It's all the way down. That's amazing. Anyway, Louis Napoleon, when last we left off France, it was 1848. There was a revolution. And because of said revolution, they had gotten rid of Louis Philippe. They had decided now they're a republic again. We are the second republic. We are number one. And we are going to elect a president. And this guy runs. And obviously, just look at him. He wins. He has a famous last name. And that is that he is Louis Napoleon. I mean, he's a Bonaparte. He's related to the famous Napoleon Bonaparte. He is, I believe, the nephew of Napoleon. Anyway, he says, look, I'm going to protect your property. So that appeals to all the middle class people and the rich people. They're all like, oh, okay, he's going to protect our property. Because people are freaking out. If you recall, when we talked about 1848, there was some hints of socialism there that were making people a little edgy. And then this guy comes along and says, look, I'm anti-socialism. And everybody's like, oh, okay, great. But then he appeals to the poor too, because he's like, oh, and by the way, I'm also going to end poverty. People were like, Louis Napoleon, did you just say you're going to get rid of all poor people? He's like, no. I'm going to help them. They're not going to be poor anymore. Okay. And also, while I'm at it, I'm going to protect your property. This is a third path. We're not going socialism. We're not going capitalism. We're zagging. We're going third path. So that's pretty great. And he appeals to this idea of the French that he is this great romantic figure. And again, not romantic like, but like romantic like he represents something greater. And he's like, hey, we're French. I mean, keep in mind, Napoleon Bonaparte, for all of his flaws, which he did have many, Napoleon Bonaparte was a French national hero. The guy was a superstar. And because of that, his nephew here is able to kind of trade on his name. In 1851, the National Assembly refuses to change the Constitution for him. Now, Louis Napoleon, he's upset because he had made a deal in 1848 when he won. He was elected in December. That he said, look, National Assembly, I'll go along with a bunch of stuff you guys want, but you got to promise that I get a second term. It was pretty well established in democracies like America that a president can have 2 terms. So this guy's like, hey, I want to be a 2-term president. National Assembly refuses. And what do? Well, Louis Napoleon could just turn and walk away, or he could bring in the army and stage a coup d'etat and seize power for himself. And here is the brilliance of the American Constitution and the American political system. No matter who is in office, no matter what you think of them, we have never had an armed coup take place because someone didn't want to leave power. Every year in January, or every 4 years in January, we have a president get up there and then say, I'm done. Here's the next guy or lady. And then someone else comes in, and it's this transition of power that's smooth. France, on its very first president in the Second Republic, fails to have a smooth transition, and the Second Republic is dead. It lasted for 3 years. That ain't nothing. So this guy declares himself emperor. Isn't that what Napoleon Bonaparte also did? Didn't he also declare himself emperor? Yeah, he did. And so Louis Napoleon's like, I'm an emperor too. And he even says, I'm Napoleon III. And you might be like, well, okay, pause. Number one, you look great. But, Second French Empire, first one's Napoleon. But you're there was Napoleon, and then there was you. It's because it's one of those things like with Louis XVII of France, where you leave a number there for someone who never properly ruled. Napoleon II would have been Napoleon Bonaparte's son, but he never really got a chance to rule, but out of, respect, they kind of leave it as, a placeholder. So, Louis Napoleon, now known as Napoleon III, just skips straight to that 3 Roman numeral. All right, well, what's homie like? Well, I keep cutting off. Let's see if I can fix it. There we go. Napoleon, he tries to do his third way thing. So he's going to have public works programs. The government is going to pay people to work on building projects. And he brings in this guy named George Haussmann, which I always think of Haussmann. That's actually how you say it in German, Haussmann. He would be Haussmann. And he is the guy that rebuilds Paris, basically. Obviously not single-handedly. They're using a lot of local labor. But he redesigns Paris to make it a modern city. And a lot of what you think of nowadays as the beautiful city of Paris all comes from the work of George Haussmann. And this creates a lot of jobs. It makes Paris beautiful. I mean, if you go to Paris, everyone talks about how it's such a romantic city and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it legit is gorge, okay? It's a gorgeous city. The French bank starts funding people to get into industry, so the French Industrial Revolution gets roaring up. It already kind of was, but it gets going even better. Railroads are built all across the country, kind of with Paris as a hub. Everything is kind of heading towards Paris, like it's the main city in the middle. And see, when they rebuild Paris, they also have certain hub parts, like the Arc de Triomphe here. If you look at an overhead view of Paris, these are all neighborhoods, and then it all leads to one of those turnabouts that always upsets people at River Park. So the idea is you're making broader avenues. See how wide they are? This is good because they don't know it yet, but roads are going to get much busier and much more crowded because of cars. Cars aren't going to come around for a little bit longer, but they're already getting busier, and it gets a little crazy. They also have electric streetcars around this time as well. The other advantage to having broader avenues is it's harder to set up barricades. You might recall in Les Mis, if you ever watched that movie, they set up barricades to block off the streets. Well, George Haussmann and Napoleon III are like, nah, bro. Don't do that no more. We got to have this thing where you can't easily block me. You say, well, I thought this guy was like a man of the people. Yeah, he kind of is. And also he declared himself emperor. But at the same time, he still shares a lot of power with the National Assembly, so he's kind of a weaker emperor than Napoleon Bonaparte was. He's an interesting cat. Anyway, Napoleon's problem is that people are going to complain no matter what, and he wants to make everybody happy. He tries very hard to be somebody who's kind of a centrist, but it's hard. He is going to get involved all over Europe, we're going to see as this lecture goes on, and also even send troops over to Mexico. You might be like, what? Mr. Oliver, Cinco de Mayo. Cinco de Mayo is when Mexico defeats... Who was it they defeated? France. And why was France there? Because of Napoleon III, because he decided to get involved and back a Catholic monarchy in Mexico. It didn't work, but he was trying. Anyway, he increases the power of Parliament because people are angry at him for his foreign stuff. He legalizes unions and strikes, which is notable because in England, they had started in 1799 the Combination Acts. And the Combination Acts had said you're not allowed to have strikes, you're not allowed to have unions. Napoleon III is like, nah, bro, that's cool. Eases censorship, promotes free trade. These are, boom, 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 That's liberalism right there. That's 19th century liberalism. So we like that. He also returns control of education to government. And there you get the Catholic Church getting more involved because they're like, what are you doing taking away our power, man? Because remember, government now is going to be the one putting stuff out. And a lot of it is like, here's secular education, non-religious, not anti-religious, just non-religious. And Pope Pius, who was the Pope at the time, responds by writing this book, and he's like, brah, that ain't cool. Look at this guy. Look at this dude. I love this Pope. He looks like he's getting ready to whoop some liberals. He is so upset, very conservative man. And he's like, you are taking religion out of the schools. This is unacceptable. This is 1864, okay? So even conservatives today, this is still an issue of like, what's the balance between morals and education? Like, can you have both? So, well, Mr. Oliver, he just started in 1848 and already, yeah. Napoleon goes to war against Germany. Now, they're not called Germany yet, as we'll talk about in a different lecture. They're called Prussia, but it's gonna be Germany. And he loses. Not only that, but homie decides, I am going to lead my troops into battle. And that is a wonderful, old-timey, romantic, like the leader that sacrifices himself kind of concept. Except he's going against the best army in Europe. I mean, Prussia is a bunch of bad astronauts, okay? They are tough. Remember Frederick the Great? That army had started back with his dad, Frederick William I, Frederick William I, the soldier's king. He had crafted the best army in Europe way back in the day. And now, over 100 years later, Prussia's still, kicking butts and taking names. So Napoleon gets captured in battle. Now you say, well, okay, so what happens? Napoleon's people decide, you know what? We didn't like him anyway. We don't want him. We will have another republic. So in 1848 to 1851, we have the Second Republic. Now, starting in 1871, we have the Third Republic. And the Third Republic immediately says, we're going to keep fighting against Prussia. But they lose. In fact, the Prussian army has Paris surrounded. And the Prussian people are like, oh God, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And the Prussian army just says, okay, fine, we're going to starve them out. So they don't allow them to get any food. People in Paris are forced to break into the zoo and slaughter zoo animals to survive. People are literally eating rats in the streets. The rich people were the ones eating, like the hippopotami and all that. I'm assuming that's the plural of hippopotamuses. Oop, let's adjust again. A couple of years later, in 1889, they have a centennial celebration of the French Revolution, and they want to showcase French industrialism. You might recall that this is one of those World's Fairs. You might recall that previously they had the Crystal Palace exhibition in Britain to kind of celebrate how industrially awesome they were at the early part of the 19th century. Well, here, how better to celebrate French industrialism than to create a giant tower? And that's where the Eiffel Tower comes from. At the time, it was constructed as just a thing for the World's Fair, and it was intended to be temporary. But people liked it so much, they kept it open after the fair ended, and they were like, oh yeah, well, we're still going to get rid of it. And they kept doing it, and they kept doing it, because tourism was great. People liked to go up there. Famously, Oscar Wilde said he hated this thing. He said, my favorite place to eat in town is... I got a notification. I apologize for that. Oh, traffic is good on the way home. It's letting me know. Thank you. He said, I always eat at the top of the Eiffel Tower. There's a restaurant at the top. I don't think there is anymore. I don't know. And he says, that's where I eat. And everybody's like, bro, I thought you hate the Eiffel Tower. You're always complaining about it. He said, it's the only place in Paris where you can't see the darn thing. He didn't say darn. That's a story. That's them building the tower. Designed by an architect named Alec Eiffel. Seriously. Look at that. Look at those tourists. That's typical Frenchmen, and I was posing with him. Former student Alex Carey. All right, now we move into a different thing that happens under the Third Republic, and that is the Dreyfus Affair. There was this guy, Alfred Dreyfus, hello, and Dreyfus is accused of helping the Germans, and this is especially bad because the Germans had just defeated the French in the Franco-Prussian War. And that was 1870 to 71. That was the zoo animal eating and the Napoleon III gets captured stuff. Anyway, they accuse him of treason. Problem, he didn't actually commit treason. You say, what? But was he helping the Germans? No, he was not. So why did they say that? Because he was Jewish, and he was a captain in the army. So that's racist. Yeah, it kind of extremely is. So that kind of splits France. It becomes awkward because you've got France where this Third Republic strongly denounces this. And the Catholic Church and the army strongly support it. Because again, it was a different time. The Catholic Church, I'm not knocking the Catholic Church now, but even late 19th century into early 20th century Catholic Church is very anti-Semitic, very anti-Jewish. And they were like, nah, you can't trust those people. And the Republic's like, no, we are children of the Enlightenment. We should have no religious or racial discrimination, blah, blah, blah. And it creates a rift that actually leads France to become more secular because they start making a break away from the Catholic Church consciously. This is really kind of the opposite of the way they'd been going for so long. Meanwhile, Italy. Mr. Oliver, that was a really awkward transition. Yeah, I know. I didn't have a good transition here. But I want to do this first lecture on Italy and France. So, Italy, I'm going to try to keep it kind of simple, okay? Because this is complicated, but for this class, it's an overview class. They don't really expect you to be an expert. You just need to know, the highlights. So basically, in 1815, after the Congress of Vienna, because that right there, 1815, you should be like, that's the Battle of Waterloo, and that's the Congress of Vienna, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so Italy had been divided ever since the fall of Rome in 476. But even up to and including 1815, they shared kind of a common culture. And nationalism, which was a big thing in the early 19th century, kind of starts uniting people and making people be aware of their culture. And they look at it and they go, how come we're controlled by all these other places? How come we're not Italy the Great, this wonderful country that had once been the master of Europe? And they're not like, hey, we want to conquer everything. They're just like, hey, we were great once. So, what the heck? And this guy, Giuseppe Mazzini, he is this founder of this Young Italy movement, inspiring people to fight the power and have a nationalistic revolt and establish a republic in Rome. And you say, well, who was in charge in Rome at the time? The Pope. If you look back here, that's the Papal States. And the Pope, going way back to Caesar Borgia, way back in your Italian Renaissance lecture, he had kind of been in charge here. So, Giuseppe Mazzini and Garibaldi, they're two different people, but they have the same first name. They try to establish a republic in Rome, but they are not successful. The Pope actually flees, but Napoleon III, who is a good Catholic, is like, nah, you are not doing this. Hashtag no. Now, Napoleon III, again, he's an interesting cat. He's like, I'm going to go get involved in this stuff, because remember I said he liked to get involved in other people's affairs. But he's also like, hey, I'm going to fight for Catholicism. But meanwhile, at home, he's making liberal reforms to take the Catholic Church out of education. He's really interesting because he's all over the place. Which actually, even though he's an emperor, that's usually something you see in a democracy, where you have things that seem contradictory based on different impulses that the leaders have. So anyway, Napoleon III helped crush this rebellion in 1848, one of the many revolutions of 1848, you probably recall, and the Pope is restored to power. So this is the That's right there. This is Garibaldi, and this is Mazzini, and this is the people having their revolution. And this might look familiar because this is the Italian flag. This looks pretty similar to the way we think of it now. It's because later on, once they are successful in unifying, they actually will adopt that flag. So, King Victor Emmanuel II is the king of Piedmont, Sardinia. And I want to go back for just a second. Piedmont, Sardinia is up here. Here's Piedmont. And Sardinia is just this little place in there. It's all bundled together on this map. And he's like, you know what? I kind of like that idea of it's unifying Italy. And people are like, oh, really? You want to make it a republic? And he's like, no, no, no. Not a republic. I like them unifying under me. And people are like, well, we like the unifying part. He's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And Victor Emmanuel has this prime minister named Camillo Cavour. And Camillo Cavour, another amazing facial hair performance here. And another one. This is the DJ Khaled of facial hair wonderfulness. I love his jaunty pose here. When I got my... Okay, well, I didn't really do this. I'm not going to lie. But if I ever got my high school yearbook pictures taken again, you know, the senior pictures where you're always like, you know, most people are like, you know, oh, you can't see me. I got to put it back. And most people are like, everybody's like always like looking over like they're surprised. Anyway, my pose is now going to be like Homeboy and be jauntily resting against something, and I'll be like, that's right. Anyway, that's Victor Emmanuel. There's Cavour. So what's so great about Cavour? Well, Piedmont Sardinia helps Britain, France, in the Crimean War. Mr. Oliver, we didn't talk about the Crimean War. We will, okay? Just chill. Just be cool for like 10 seconds, okay? We're going to talk about that a little bit later when we get to Russia, because really it's kind of Russia that causes it. Anyway, Cavour says, look, let's get involved here, to kind of establish themselves as a player on the national stage, and then gets involved in a war against Austria. And you say, whoa, 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 you're fighting above your weight class a little bit there, aren't you, little Piedmont? You know, you're a little feller. In Austria, you know, they're strong. They're one of the great powers of Europe. He says, don't worry about it. I've got an ally. His name, Napoleon III. Boom, back to Napoleon III. That's why I did these together. And so Napoleon III's like, I am going to help you. But the Pope he doesn't call up, but the Pope complains to Napoleon III. It's like, what are you doing? You're helping these liberals try to unify Italy? Dude, we hate liberalism. And Napoleon's like, yeah, I mean, I'm kind of inconsistent about it, but yes, I suppose we do. So then he says, I'm not going to actually support you. Oh. Okay, poor Cavour here, poor Victor Emmanuel. So they stop the war, and they end up uniting a little bit. Yeah, here's a better map with Sardinia and Piedmont, and the other one, it wasn't color-coded well. Anyway, so you get a little bit of territory. Napoleon actually ends up with Savoy here, and Nice, which nowadays is like a fancy place you can go, and Parma, Tuscany, and Romagna revolt as like when they see this. They're like, wait, guys, we actually have a chance of unifying here. So the dominoes start falling. That war's over. But there starts being these movements, like everybody in these little places start having their own little revolution saying, we want to join Piedmont. We want to have a unified Italy. And you'll see, if you just look at this map here, okay, 1815, nothing much happening. But by 1860, they're going to be mostly unified. And in the south, down here in the south, it was owned by a place called the Kingdom of Two Sicilies. And essentially, this is the remnants of the Spanish Bourbon dynasty. You might recall, this is confusing, okay? And if you can handle it, great. If you can't, just, you know, feel free to kind of, But the Bourbon dynasty, remember when Louis put his Um, it put Philip of Anjou on the throne of Spain, and that kind of triggered a war. That was the War of the Spanish Succession. Well, that line of Bourbons, the last name, ended up eventually controlling southern Italy and Sicily. And then there's a revolt in 1860. Now, this is not related to all the stuff going on in the north. In the north, that's the Piedmont thing, the Piedmont Sardinian kind of thing, with Cavour and Victor Emmanuel doing their stuff. And down in the south, we got Garibaldi, and you might recall him from 1848 Revolution. And he's like, yes, I'm back again. And he's like, I got my own private army now, and they're called the Red Shirts. And so they start in Sicily and start moving their way north, rallying the peasants. Peasants are joining them, becoming Red Shirts too. It's pretty dramatic. There he is, looking all red-shirted and awesome. By the way, fun note, I had a student once in AP make a typo. He was writing an essay, and he made a little error. And he omitted one of the letters in Red Shirts in the second word there. And he said the Red Shirts, but again he misspelled it, the Red Shirts were running all across southern Italy, causing trouble for the Bourbon dynasty. Anyway, so Garibaldi starts moving north, and he gets up to the Papal States. And there is a problem, because we've had Piedmont Sardinia, they're kind of heading south. Garibaldi's heading north. What do we do with the Papal States? Because even people who wanted a nationally united Italy were still like a little bit like, what do we do with the Pope? Because we don't want to be disrespectful to the Pope. Because for the most part, these liberals are still good Catholics, and they don't want to make the Pope angry. So they're like, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? Cavour sends an army down there to protect the Papal States. In reality, he's like, we want to unite this stuff under us in Piedmont. We want Victor Emmanuel to be king. What are we going to do if this Garibaldi guy gets it to become a republic? We don't want that. We want to have a monarchy, perhaps even a constitutional monarchy, but still a monarchy. So the solution happens. We have an awkward standoff, and then Garibaldi says, you know what, for the sake of Italy, I want to surrender now. My army is not going to oppose you. I've conquered southern Italy. That's yours now, bro. Let's have a unified Italy under Victor Emmanuel II. Everybody's super pumped up. And in 1861, Victor Emmanuel II is crowned the king of a unified Italy. And here we are, sure enough, we've got Garibaldi. And here's Victor Emmanuel II of Piedmont Sardinia. And Garibaldi is affixing a boot, because Italy's shaped like a boot, get it? Onto the foot of Victor Emmanuel II. Isn't that beautiful? The only other two parts that really aren't part of the unified Italy are Venetia, which Italy will take in 1870 after making an alliance with Prussia against the Austrians. And in 1871, they finally add Rome. But the Pope refuses to acknowledge that Italy is unified now and remains a prisoner in the Vatican. Like, he just locks himself in the Vatican Church, and he's just like, nope. Locks it up. But problems. Because don't we always have problems? The Republicans, the people who wanted a republic, in other words, not like your Republican Party in America, they supported Garibaldi, and they were like, yeah, remember how we fought for a republic, and our boy Garibaldi just kind of rolled over and gave Victor Emmanuel the power? We don't like that. Many Catholics are upset. They're like, this is disrespectful to the Pope. It is problem. And this is a famous political cartoon from the time. You've got Victor Emmanuel here, and he's wielding a sword that says temporal power. So it's saying like, hey, you got an army. But the Pope's like, nah, but I got the keys. And careful, this isn't a DJ Khaled kind of thing. This is the keys to the kingdom of heaven. It's more of he's got temporal, earthly power. But yo, I hold the keys to heaven, so you got nothing on me, son. And we're going to stop there because German unification is super fun. And we're going to save that for a different time. Bye-bye.